Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Nelson Ogunshakin. I'm the Chief Executive of FIDIC, and welcome to the COP26 Net Zero and the Climate Change Charter. Today, we are actually airing our view on the world of climate change, and it's a month before the COP26, where the world leaders is going to get together and hopefully have an agreement on the way forward. Climate change, is it real or not? It is real. And what is FIDIC doing about it? Today is about opportunity for us to hear our Sustainability Development Committee to air their views on their suggestion on what FIDIC should be doing. It's long coming, and we've been talking about it for quite a long time. So we have an opportunity today for 1 hour, if I can make a point of it. It's not 1.5 hours. For 1 hour today, we're going to share with you our way forward on the Climate Change Charter. At this point in time, next slide, please, Barbara. I'm just going to share with you basically the roadmap so far. For those who've been following FIDIC, we've done over 45 webinars so far, and we'll keep going. We've had over 35,000 people register, and we've had close to 29,000 attended our event from 150 countries around the world. And I do believe that in the YouTube, we've got close to 34,000 people who are actually following the webinar program. And this webinar program will be actually uploaded once we finish within the 1 hour. So moving forward, from my point of view, some people just talk about the climate change and the COP26. Now, we haven't just stumbled into it. We've been working on it for quite a long time. And I use the word we, our Sustainability Development Committee has been very, very busy under Tracey, who's been leading them. So we went through initial point of discussing the particular issue on the, should we do something or not? Then we had a draft document, and the first review came through, which went to the board, and the board came back with feedback that is a second review, and we are now making progress where we have the third review coming through. And today we're going to share with you in essence of what is actually climate change. Ultimately, when we finish this particular webinar, we'll be publishing that final document sometime in the middle of the COP26. So next slide, please, Barbara. So moving forward, you may probably say, what does this mean after the conversation today? Yes, we are just about to start the journey. We do set up FIDIC for global goals. This is going to be a campaign and really a branding item that will go on for quite a while. It's going to go well before and after the COP26. So what we're going to do, we're going to launch a chapter in about a week's time. And there's a number of agendas going to come through from the program where we'll be creating a series of groups that will help us to address the issue that we'll be addressing that will impact our member, our industry, our association, and individual players in the industry. Hopefully, this is a long-time game, and we're expecting the world to support us as we follow this campaign. I'm told that we have close to 1,000 people that registered today, and we have from 109 countries, and that seems to me that this subject is topical and it's not rocket science. Next slide, please. At this point in time, I'm delighted to introduce our president, Anthony Barry from Australia, to share with us a few words on the subject and how critical this is to FIDIC and the FIDIC board. So Tony, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. And if I could join Nelson in welcoming you all to this webinar, a very important and critical subject at this time. And so I do encourage you to share it with your friends and open the discussion. For many years, FIDIC's built design professionals, consulting engineers have been focused on improving sustainability on our projects through better planning, technology and innovation. FIDIC's published its first project sustainability management guidelines back in 2004 with manuals, white papers and further additions as late as 2014. Our FIDIC contracts have also included clauses relating to environment and sustainability. Our understanding at the time. And there's little doubt that between the publication of the IPCC's decadal report AR5 in 2014 to their recent report in 2021, we have a very different problem on our hands. We have a very different level of challenge that we need to undertake. Warming to something that's tolerable, in which our communities and our societies continue to live and enjoy the lifestyle that we've come to appreciate. We are left with no choice but to reduce our carbon emissions drastically and And as everybody is aware, COP26 hopefully will be focused on net zero 2050. The reality is that the political commitments we have at this time are well short of that target. So there is much to do, and there is not much time to do it. FIDIC embraces the science of climate change as it's been expressed by the IPCC, and we support decarbonisation, climate change adaptation, and improving resilience. We're committed to providing the leadership and the guidance to our industry, working closely with our members and partners across all areas of the built environment. The world's consulting engineers and the firms that they work for have the ability and the opportunity to advise governments, investors, and clients to use technology and to innovatively plan and design the built environment to support decarbonisation of our economies, to adapt and build the resilience which will support our communities to flourish into the future. Our approach must address emissions throughout the whole life cycle of our facilities. Consulting engineers are also vital in communicating and applying the science. Our approach needs to be global, but it also needs to touch down locally through every professional, understanding the science, becoming carbon savvy, communicating with their clients, colleagues, and their friends. If we can mobilise the industry, we have the opportunity to give the world hope and confidence that what is required. I congratulate the FIDIC Sustainability Committee for the work they've put into this webinar and to the Charter, and I thank the FIDIC Secretariat for their support for this organisation. There are many, many people to date who've informally contributed on our climate change Charter discussion, and their response has been amazing and encouraging. But it has also been diverse, and it really does illustrate the scale of the global challenge. We will need additional experts to volunteer for tasks to address the issues that are confronting our industry, and we do ask that if you're interested, you register your interest on the FIDIC website. I look forward to the discussion tonight, and I hope you will find it informative. COP26 is a very important event for our world, and FIDIC will work over the next year to lead our industry's response to the outcomes of that conference. Thank you, and back to you, Nelson.
Thank you very much, Tony. Apology for the sound issue we have there. I'm not quite sure what's going on in background, but we're going to do our best to make sure we recover from that. I do hear that there are difficulties in hearing Tony. I'm sure you get the opportunity later on towards the end to have him to summarize. Hopefully we can fix that issue. It really back to me now to try and give this back again into Kickstart. I'm delighted to basically just give it a kickstart by asking you, the audience, do you believe that the climate, the commitment at the moment are enough to meet the climate change challenge? In another word, do you believe the current commitment by everybody and government are enough to meet the climate change challenge? The answer is yes or no. I suspect it'd be time for people to vote. And it'd be interesting if somebody tells me something I don't know. I do know that we're not doing enough. I do know that the industry believes that we should do more. And I do know that everybody that I've spoken to tells me 2030, 2050, which one is it? And which one are we aiming at? So the question is, do you believe current commitments are enough to meet the climate challenge? Yes or no? Question, feedback from Barbara, where are we? Well, I'm glad everybody seems to believe that it is 89%. It's close to say 100%. So thank you very much, Barbara, for that feedback, which is encouraging, but actually encouraging but challenging. What does that mean? It means that we have a long way to go. This is a global challenge. As Tony said, we are all in it together. I remember when we had a conference about a few weeks ago, we have Borje Brendel from World Economic Forum. He said the time is now, and it's time for us to act, and we now need to act immediately as soon as possible. Now, I do believe this particular program is 1 hour, it's not 1.5 hours. So I'm going to hand over to Tracey Ryan. She's the Managing Director of Aurecon New Zealand, and she's the Chair of the FIDIC Sustainable Development Committee. So Tracey, no pressure, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
No pressure, Nelson. Tenda koto koto, a warm welcome here from New Zealand. Nelson, thank you, and as well, Tony, for that warm introduction to today's session. And like you said before, we are all in this together, and we very much are all in this together. And it's great to see that we're kind of joined for around 106 countries around the world, which shows the importance of this conversation we're going to have today. Something popped onto my screen this morning and I just wrote it down, and it really was around COP26 and the vision around it, which is around uniting the world to tackle climate change. And I think it's very much, as we kind of, as the Sustainable Development Committee kind of got together and going, well, what are the sort of things that we'd like to achieve as part of our terms of reference? Climate change was certainly number one, and pulling something like this together was really the sort of top priority for us as a committee to be able to kind of work on this. And I'd love to think that our charter and the commitment that sits behind it is about uniting us as an industry to certainly come together and our key stakeholders to tackle what we're faced with in relation to climate change. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Robert Spencer, who's Director of Sustainable Development at AECOM, but also a Vice Deputy for the Sustainable Development Committee. And this was certainly, Robert certainly led the working group and very much instrumental around pulling the charter together. So I'm going to hand over to Robert now, who's going to take us through and really talk a little bit more what sits in the charter, the purpose behind it, and just highlight some of the sort of key things. And then we're going to go into a bit of a panel conversation. I'm joined by also some other fellow Sustainable Development Committee members who are going to hear and talk through what they kind of will take out of it and highlight some key things. And then, like Nelson said, please, we want this to be interactive. And I've seen some other questions already coming. So do highlight your questions. I'll keep an eye on the chat function that's there. We will try and get to them and address as we kind of go through and make sure that we do. And like Nelson said, we do have only an hour. So I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Robert.
Thanks very much indeed, Tracy. Are you picking me up okay on the mic?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Excellent. Look, I'm extremely privileged to be able to be talking about this. It's been a wonderful experience and a really challenging and inspiring experience working with our committee and our wider stakeholders to pull this draft of AECOM's climate charter together. And what I'm going to do over the next 10 or so minutes is talk you through some of the key points we've put into the climate charter in order to do exactly what our colleagues in advance have been speaking about, which is acting together collaboratively, bringing everyone along, and recognizing that this can only happen if we all pull in the same direction. And we, as the engineering community, and as I'm sure many of you know, FIDIC represents over 1 million professional engineers around the globe. We can have a huge impact. And that's what this charter is about. It's about us coming together and pulling in the same direction and having a massive impact on addressing climate change. And I think this has been so inspiring. And I want to just give you some of the sort of headlines, first of all, and then I'll talk through some of the content that you'll see in a few days when we finalize the charter and we make it public in advance of the COP26 negotiations getting underway. So the first thing, and I'm inspired here a little bit by talking to one of my clients, one of my colleagues at Transport for London, Sam Longman, the other day. He said to me, we pride ourselves in this profession as being value engineers, but actually going forwards, we need to be carbon engineers, and proud of it too. And I think that was really motivating for me to just, let's get together as a profession and really tackle this crisis and start pulling the carbon out of our engineering designs, make our engineers more attuned into providing resilient solutions that are going to be adaptable to the coming climate impacts that we all know are coming down the line. Even if we addressed climate change right now and stopped it in its tracks, we've still got global warming built in that we're going to have to deal with. So what is the document going to address? Well, we're starting at home here. We're looking at FIDIC and we're saying, what will FIDIC do? And then we're going to look at the member associations, our partners across the world, who also have their own climate commitments that they're producing. And we'll provide some guidance in that direction. And then we'll look at projects, schemes, company approaches, and actually one of the most important things, I think, and indeed when we were first considering this, we thought, should we actually put the individual engineer right at the top of the charter? But we thought, well, we better take care of things at home first. So FIDIC's at the top in terms of what we will do, set an example, really walk the talk. And then one of the important things that we conclude on is what the individual professional engineer can do. So look, there are three key things that I want you to take away from the purpose of the charter. One is that FIDIC is committing to reducing its own operational emissions. 2, we want to galvanize the whole engineering community across the world, all our professionals, to reduce embodied and operational carbon emissions in building and infrastructure projects, in which we consult, in which we design, in which we deliver for our clients. That is the biggest impact we can have as the engineering community. We can all look at our own company operations and we address that. We can look at our individual actions, but when we work together for our clients and collaborate, often in joint ventures, in consortiums, it's rarely alone. We always act as a team. What can we do to pull the carbon out of our engineering designs and create more resilient solutions for our clients that are going to stand the test of time, whatever global warming throws at us? And so then we need to look, the third thing is supporting climate change adaptation. Looking at mitigation, of course, that's going to be intrinsic, but also designing to enable our infrastructure, our buildings to recover from and go forward, even in the event of climate impacts that are going to come to pass. So that's it. It's a guiding document. It's high level. It talks about commitments and aspirations, and it's for the entire global engineering profession. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, there'll be something in this charter for you that you can take and you can say, right, this is how I'm going to contribute. So we pride ourselves as value engineers, but we need to be carbon engineers too. So this is about inspiring our profession and acting as a single point of reference. So now I'm just going to go through some of the quick tables of contents, if you like, of what the individual organizations are going to do. And I'm just going to pick out a few key things under each one. Otherwise, we'd be here for an hour just talking about the charter's contents itself. I'm just going to give you some highlights. So for FIDIC, what do we do best? Influence, advocacy. You know, that's what FIDIC's known for. It's also known for its guidance, specifically its guidance on procurement, projects, how to undertake projects, how to deliver change. So if we integrate net zero infrastructure, carbon reduction, resilience, nature-based solutions into all that stuff that FIDIC already does, then that is a massive impact. And so I think that's going to be what we're going to see going forward. So this charter is really just the start. It's the line in the sand. And then it's what do we do after that to follow through on the charter? All that guidance, all the companies and member associations that constitute FIDIC. There's so much good practice out there. So I think there's a huge amount that we can do when we bring those resources together. So FIDIC will be advocating, we'll be creating and actually sharing resources and training that's already out there, making that available in a central point, providing that country level support to our member associations, and indeed recognizing fantastic achievements. You know, our FIDIC awards are going to be really tuned into this net zero resilience agenda as well. And what's FIDIC going to do about its own operations? It's going to take a science-based approach, which is the investment grade approach that everyone around the world responsible is taking. So we're going to be looking at reducing our scope 1 and 2 emissions and our scope 3 emissions where they concern business travel and commuting of our staff. And whatever we haven't been able to reduce through addressing our scope 1 and 2 in our business travel and commuting, we're going to look at a carbon neutral solution from 2023 onwards. And we're going to annually report on our progress. That's really critical good practice as well. Letting the world know transparently and in a clear way how we're doing and what can we learn from others and what can we share about good practice that we've developed. And for the member associations, it's pretty much as above for FIDIC, but it's much more specific to the country. It's the country level guidance. It's the country. It's looking at the country's own grid mix. You know, some countries have more renewables, some countries have less. How do we leverage that grid mix in terms of energy and power solutions to create really good net zero and resilient engineering solutions? How can the member associations advocate FIDIC resources and work with FIDIC on specific country level route maps for our engineering communities in the respective countries that we work with across the world? And now to our project teams and schemes. I think this is where we need to really change our mindset so that we're bringing carbon emissions under management as a normal way of doing business with our engineering designs. When reporting on our progress at the project level, and this involves becoming carbon literate, developing our expertise, providing advice to our clients that will actually promote carbon reduction and help them with their journeys as well. They're all on this as well. Advising on the climate risks, looking at the climate models and understanding them and seeing how that will impact the engineering designs that we're developing. And then looking at project metrics for emissions, absolutely critical. How do we measure performance? Baselining, benchmarking, and then looking at consistent reductions over time so that we start to systematically pull carbon out of our designs. What about the companies? Policies, corporate objectives, all needs to be integrated into the company net zero resilient culture. We need to be supporting our employees to work on projects that align with their professional preferences and their desire to eliminate climate harm from our engineering work. What can we do that will encourage employees? How do we build this into our culture and reward system, into our performance and rewards perhaps, into team recognition, into awards as well? How do we develop those climate skills, encouraging and rewarding climate literacy amongst our engineering professions? And how do we develop that practitioner sort of recognition? Perhaps in some companies I've heard that there are net zero practitioner training programs that you can go through now, or climate awareness programs, all to do with building climate and carbon literacy so that it becomes business as usual. And then of course you need the toolkit, the tools, the platforms, the dashboards for making carbon business as usual, for integrating it into our professional engineering solutions right from the start. What's the total carbon load of our designs? What carbon metrics are we going to use? What carbon calculators are we using? How can we aggregate all the carbon impacts that we're taking as, for example, a single engineering firm, and say, well, that's our contribution to reducing carbon in our engineering designs. So we need to bring this carbon data under management, and this goes hand in hand with the digital revolution and the building information systems revolution, GIS, digital twins. This is all helping us get this carbon data under management and effectively build tools and resources that allow us to become carbon literate. But then we need to incorporate natural systems, adaptive systems, and incorporate renewables, of course, clean energy solutions, so that our engineering solutions can operate in a clean way. And my colleagues later on will talk in depth to some of these approaches. But what do the company operations themselves need to do? They need to be taking a science-based approach, just like is best practice, just like FIDIC and the member associations will do. Need to follow the greenhouse gas protocol. There are standards out there, international standards that people can follow if they're looking for what is the actual route map? How do I take an approach here? What standard do I hold our company to? ISO 14064-1. That's a very good approach to follow. Look at the greenhouse gas protocol. That tells you how to do everything. Look at the Science-Based Targets Initiative website. Really, really informative, lots of guidance there. So how do you develop your company's net zero resilient strategy? How do you drive your company off renewable energy, switch off from fossil fuels, switch on to clean energy to power your company? How can you look at your fleet vehicles? And again, this is different in different countries, different jurisdictions, different levels of maturity in terms of the availability of clean and renewable energy sources. So we've got to go at our own pace, but we also got to be ready to bring in innovation, new technologies, new opportunities where they arise as they develop. And then it's reporting. So, just like we said for FIDIC, the companies need to be reporting in a responsible and transparent way. There are some big frameworks out there that are pretty well recognized now by investors. So, for example, SASB, for example, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. These are recognized, and actually increasingly they're going to be key to securing capital for companies to work. And now for me, one of the most special parts of the Charter and the concluding part, this is about individuals. This global engineering profession that FIDIC is the sort of family for is huge in its diversity and its variety of skills and approaches to engineering solutions. So what do we do first? We audit our own personal behaviors, our way of thinking about climate and carbon, and how we can address our own personal carbon footprint. And there are lots of good apps out there. You might have come across the World Wildlife Fund one, or there's others that actually help you work out what is my personal carbon footprint and how can I work to address that. Look at your carbon solutions knowledge, expand your climate solutions knowledge, see what's out there in your profession and in terms of related professions. What are the tools? What are the new materials that are coming on stream that can help with our engineering solutions? What are the new technologies that can save energy, clean up the air, clean up the water, in effect, deliver a cleaner environment for us to work with? And then the key thing, know the carbon load of the project designs that you're working on. Build up your carbon literacy and knowledge so that you can actually reduce the carbon load of your engineering designs. Be an advocate, support your team members, support your company, create guidance, create good materials, be it videos, blogs, dashboards, training tools, carbon calculator tools. there's so much ingenuity out there in our profession. If we apply ourselves to this carbon, net zero carbon goal, then there's no limits to really what we can achieve in terms of engineering designs. So I think that's really crucial. And then this is also one of the most important things for me. And I remember Jeff French, one of my mentors early on in my career, and I know Nelson knows Jeff well. You know, he said to me that, you know, Robert, you need to be the pacer to your client. You know, if your client's running a marathon on their climate change journey, their net zero journey, we're the pacer, we're the consistent professional, helping the client, providing them with guidance, supporting them, keeping them on the run, so that they feel that they've got that support behind them and they can keep their pace at the right level. And that's got to be ambitious, hasn't it? Given what we just heard about the targets that we've got to reach. So how can you integrate that into your systems at work? You know, it's about healthy starts for our projects. It's about technical quality. Carbon is essentially going to be another part of the technical quality which our clients judge us on. And it's about reviewing and verifying, having your peers come in and have a look at your work and see how the carbon reduction that you've been putting together is really going to deliver impact. So that's where I'll leave it, Tracey, in terms of my run through the key ingredients of the charter. I hope that's shed a little light on what's in store for people when we publish the charter in the coming days. But I'm, for one, really excited about this. As you can see the way I talk about it, I'm really galvanized by this. I think it's going to be a massive support to our profession to really shift the needle on this one. So back to you, Tracey.
Oh, thank you, Robert, and thank you for that comprehensive overview. And I imagine everybody on this call has got your passion and energy, which will sit behind of what we all have to kind of do behind this. I'm conscious of time, and I'm also conscious that there's lots of questions coming through on the chat function. And for the purpose of time, what I might do now with Stéphanie, Natalie, and Idriss, and you, Robert, is maybe we'll go to some of the questions, because I think it will help draw out some of the things that we want to talk about, which sits in the charter. Nelson, there's also a lot around contracts in there, and I think you and Tony might wrap up on that around the next stages of what we do. So I think I'll leave that until we get towards the end of kind of what sits behind this. Is one thing about coming out with the charter, but there's going to be lots of stuff, you know, that we'll continue to do, which will sit behind once we get the charter launched in a couple of weeks' time. Look, Idriss, I might go to you first, because there's a couple of comments which have come in around, you know, Robert mentioned about adaptation. There's a lot in it around how do we need to adapt to protect communities and the natural habitat and things like that. I might just ask, you know, get you to talk around that, because, you know, you will be at COP, you're going to attend on behalf of FIDIC. We have a side event, there's a big part of that. I just think if there's any sort of comments you'd like to make to just draw out on that sort of piece for the audience today.
Yes, thank you very much to the FIDIC SDC for supporting these initiatives, and also to all the members which are really involved in this initiative. So I will summarize 3 points. One is about what Robert said about what a company could do. And to summarize, I would say that a company should know first its GHG emissions. So it means that it should quantify its emissions. And it is very simple to say it, but it's not always easy to do it. So hopefully in the coming months, it will be possible for more companies to assess their GHG emissions, and then to set up an action plan. And when there is an action plan, it is important also to set objective and to reduce the GHG emissions over time. And for those who are already involved in this progress, what is possible today is to try to align what is called the 2 degrees objective. And this is a very challenging target, I would say. And so hopefully, maybe not in the coming months, but I would say if we can do that in 1 year or in 2 years, it could be great. Because I have to say that to align with the 2 degrees objective is a very big challenge. Having said that about the question of mitigation, I can also bring some information about adaptation, because as we already know that the climate change impact are real, as Dr. Nelson was saying before, we have to adapt to each place in the world to the consequence of the climate change. And in this regard, what is useful is first for each project to identify the climate risk ranging from 2 degrees to 6 degrees pathways, because we already know that we are not sure that we will be able to reach the 2-degree objective. So it's better to have in mind what could be the consequence of a pattern which will be closer to 4 degrees rather than 2 degrees. And secondly, it is important to integrate the adaptation measures along the life cycle of the project, because very often what is done is to think about a project, an infrastructure, a building, to design it, to deliver it, but we are not always involved in the different steps after. So it means operation and maybe decommissioning. But today we have also to take care about this life cycle approach, and to have a better understanding of what could be the best solutions, not only for the design and the construction, but also for the operation and the decommissioning. And the third point is to support the implementation of the different activities, which means that it is important to develop the skills which will enable each practitioner to do its best to integrate this adaptation topics in his daily work. So this is the second point about adaptation. And then to finish about the question you raised, Tracey, thank you, about the COP26. So as you may know, we are involved in the COPs, in the Conference of Parties for the climate change now for 6 years, because we began in Paris, it was in 2015. And what we try to do is firstly to inform on FIDIC and its member activities on climate actions. So it can be a side event or, for example, a press release. And also we develop and maintain partnerships. So I think that there are different examples which have been done before, which have been said, but also I have to mention, for example, the UN agencies. So it would be the UN Habitat. It can be also the UNEP for the environmental program. And as it was mentioned, it can be also with the development banks, and also with the NGOs. And maybe later somebody will maybe Stéphanie will speak about the WWF, for example. First idea about how we contribute to the different COPs, and more specifically to the COP26, is to support the involvement of engineers with a comprehensive statement or charter. And I have to say that this charter is a new step. So I'm very glad that it can help to support the involvement of more engineers in the world. And also sometimes it's with sectoral initiatives, like for example, the GIBC, the Global Alliance for Building for Construction, which is a platform launched in 2015 for the construction sector. And they are more focused, I would say, on the construction sector. It's not agriculture or another activity, but it's mostly focused on the the sector where FIDIC is more involved, I would say. And it's a coincidence, but today, for example, they will release their report this afternoon. So it is the global status report about the construction sector and the building sector this afternoon at 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock for European Central Time. So these are the three main contributions I could mention, but hopefully we will be able to provide more examples in the discussion and in the coming weeks.
Fantastic, Idriss. Look, and hopefully everyone will keep an eye out for that report then coming out today, and also keep an eye out of the side event. I know people can register it, and that probably will go out for everybody for FIDIC of the COP event, which yourself and Robert will attend that side event. Just and Stéphanie, I might go across to you now, because there's some questions there, and we have kind of talked a little bit around you know, the adaptation, but also around biodiversity. And one of the questions here has actually come from Shandan Singh and talks about small island developing states like Mauritius are rated highly vulnerable to climate change. So flash floods, drought, etc. And one of the measures to address these issues is through the EIA process. And the question is probably, how do we integrate the charter with the existing process? But I think this is a more broader topic in general, right? And something that I know is very passionate to your heart, and some of the stuff that we are doing in that MOU with WWF. I wonder if you want to touch maybe on that, around how we're linking that into that sort of broader biodiversity and the protection of land and sea in general, which kind of comes under the charter a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Tracey. I think for me, the charter is really developed to inspire, so let's say, the engineering and consulting industry to become experts in climate and carbon engineering, and then support these adaptation strategy. Not only that, but also support the two parts of climate change that we're dealing with, right? The transition risk, which is this energy transition, but also the physical risk, which is basically protecting yourselves against the climate impacts, which links back to normally the traditional EIA processes or projects that we are used to, that we are doing, and we're doing that within the infrastructure industry, the industrial industry, and the built environment sector. And for that, we need best practices, right? We need projects, we need tools, we need guidelines, not only to reach that net zero performance, but also then to promote nature and biodiversity through, for example, infrastructure development. So today I was also reminded again, saying, remember that net zero is one thing. If we want to go to net zero, that's okay, we can offset. But biodiversity and nature, you cannot offset. Once it's gone, it's gone. So I think to embrace that biodiversity through also this climate charter, through EIA processes, I think it's extremely important. And to answer some of these questions that came up, I don't think it's about integration, the integration of the charter within the EIAs. It's the other way around. The EIAs or the projects will feed back into this charter to come up with the latest knowledge, technologies, thought processes, and tools to be able to meet those guidelines and to meet our targets. So one of the other things that the Sustainable Development Committee has been working on to address that biodiversity is that we've recently signed an MOU between FIDIC and WWF, so the World Wildlife Fund. Their mission is to conserve nature and reduce sort of the most pressing threats of diversity on Earth. Whereas FIDIC's role is, of course, to improve people's quality of life through the promotion of quality, integrity, and sustainability in the infrastructure industry on a global scale. And our goal right now for the next few years is to promote our approaches to sustainable infrastructure planning, design, development, and delivery, taking biodiversity and nature into account. So what we are going to do is develop a playbook identifying best practices and approaches to advance sustainability infrastructure development. So we need everyone's input with projects, best practices, and new ideas to be able to come up and show what is going on and what is the best thing to do at the moment. We are mutually seeking partnership opportunities and also funding opportunities. And one example is, for example, some of these philanthropy organizations, for example, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. They're supporting the environmental conservation programs. So these type of topics are on the radar for both FIDIC and WWF to enhance and embed that nature, biodiversity, and as well the net zero program into our systems. Thanks, Trace.
Thanks, Stéphanie. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask and read many of the questions. I should point out that right earlier on, Miguel posted lots of comments, and I would encourage people to look at the chat because he actually has made reference to a LinkedIn article that he's written. So so if people are interested in there, and many people are putting other stuff there, so just do read through chat. We will probably be able to download some of the stuff in chat, and we'll certainly have a look through them, the questions as they're coming through as after today's event. Natalie, there is, and I will come to you now, because I suppose, you know, in the engineering world, or the world in general, you know, a big part of what we do is by creating a sort of legacy of what we kind of leave behind, and for intergenerations sort of to come, really. And there was a question earlier on, and I think it was from Mohammed that posted it, but it was more around, you know, around partnerships and things like that, but particularly around how does FIDIC, you know, how do we influence climate change measures at construction, and what role does the sort of charter play, you know, that kind of brings construction and things as part of that. I wonder if you would like to address that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Tracy, and thanks for the opportunity to I guess be here tonight. It's certainly been really exciting to see Robert and the team bring the charter together, and I guess for me, I see it as a really key first step, you know, putting that flag on the hill around some very bold ambitions that people can look to adapt and adopt, in their organisations, no matter, you know, what phase of that sustainability journey that they're on. And I guess, you know, as you say, Tracy, partnering and partnerships are really key to all of this. We've had a number of webinars over the last 12 months or so, I guess, in relation to our State of the World reports and also our committee webinars. And the constant theme that I think came through all of those webinars is really around ensuring that, you know, in order to solve this climate crisis, in order to actually work together towards net zero and climate adaptation and meeting the SDGs, it's actually about getting not just the engineering community together, and obviously this charter helps to galvanise the engineering community, but also for us to reach into other organisations. We need to work with investors, we need to work with institutions, we need to work very multidisciplinary and cross-sector and all sorts of things to start conversations. You know, we need to work and integrate with First Nations people around some of the design principles that we can adapt in terms of some of our biodiversity contributions and all those sorts of things. So I guess more specifically with the construction sector, you know, the charter is really putting, I guess, asking everyone, no matter what their involvement is throughout the engineering sector, to really think about their contribution. But equally, as Robert talked about, trying to influence those that we work with. So as engineers, as consulting engineers specifically, I guess, influencing our clients. So be that policymakers or construction companies or the like. It's really, I think, for us to try and take some of the climate agenda to them as well, and to try and endeavour and show them where the benefits of how they can contribute to this agenda as well.
Thanks, Natalie. There's a question here, and I'm trying to summarize it from Kirill. Just says, thank you for a very important topic. Sorry, now I have lost it, but really it's talking about, it's going on around really the investment around green energy. I know Robert touched around technology and things like that, but I think across the is probably the use of technology, or particularly the focus around, so sorry, I just brought it up. The mass production of green energy will reduce costs for green energy. In final, all our industry sectors will purchase cheap green energy, which will reduce emissions. How can we enforce our business sectors to invest in green energies around that? I don't know if anyone wants to take that, or Stéphanie, maybe is that something you talked about transition risk before, and a couple of the other sort of things around it. Is that a kind of a play around for the role of green energy for us to adopt as part of that sort of transition?
I think the whole investment discussion is extremely important. And I think what I've seen in the market, especially also in Southeast Asia, where I'm based, is that there is a gap between the investment communities, like the banks or the investments, and the rest of the industry. There is sufficient interest in investments, and of course, everyone is now going to look into how to look at these guidelines that they need to apply to. However, I think the problem is that there is a gap between what the engineering industry and the consulting industry can do, and there is no conversation yet between what can be done within the timescale that we're looking for and where they need to invest in, other than, is there a return on investment? Because that's what the focus has been for a very long time. So I think that conversation needs to happen more often on what can we do with it? Where do we invest properly? Not just only in carbon offsetting, but also but that's of course where we need to start. But what's long term, what's next, not just within the next 10 years, but looking forward in the future further on how we can do that. Thanks, Trace.
Thank you. Oh, Robert's back. We didn't even know you dropped off. There you go. Chacha, Robert's back. Robert, there was a question there. There was a question around finance, and we were talking about this before that we ultimately came on, and I'm trying to bring it up, but it is around the role that financing plays in this space. Is that something, because I know we have guests on from the World Bank and Asian Development Bank and things. Is that something that you'd like to maybe touch on, because it's probably come up in a couple of points in the chat there around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things there. One is that we hope that at COP we get the increasing commitment to fulfill the sort of 100 billion a year climate finance that I think, the last count was, countries around the world still falling short of that investment, particularly from the advanced nations in climate solutions. But hopefully this current conference of the parties will further stimulate that climate finance. I think the other thing, and in terms of the way in which many of our engineers will come across this, is through procurement. I think that's a huge lever for generating net zero solutions and more climate resilient built environment solutions. So I think procurement's a big lever, and I think that's happening in two ways. So I give the example of AECOM, the company I'm working for. So we're aligned with the science-based targets approach, and we're seriously looking at our supply chain, which is our scope 3 emissions, everything that we buy from other people in our supply chain, other organizations, entities that are generating goods and services for us. So how do we bring those organizations on the same journey that we are on, the 1.5 degrees warming commitment, science-based approach? And so I think there's a huge engagement effort going on across many of the organizations in our sector, in our profession, looking at how they can influence their supply chain, and that's through the procurement route. Initially, it's probably just going to be awareness raising and looking at some of the issues that can be addressed through changing buying procedures. But I think ultimately it will start to become a filtering process, in the next years, whereby those companies that are more aligned, that have taken steps to look at their carbon footprint and address them, are going to be the ones that win the work going forwards. And I think from the client side, we've seen this really, really impactfully. So, some of the organizations we work for, we work with a lot of the major infrastructure organizations. They're integrating carbon performance, carbon weighting into their bid, bid marking, bid scoring, and that's following through into how contracts are delivered now. And what I'm seeing from colleagues that I talk to in our client organizations is that a carbon reduction effort that leads to a 10% carbon reduction across a capital delivery project will also yield at least 8% in cost savings as well. So that's a massive incentive for actually aligning cost and carbon. And I think many of the tools that you'll see developed through the engineering practices these days are looking at how you tune carbon and cost together, so that you not only get the most carbon efficient solution, but also a really good value solution for the client as well. So I think procurement and pulling those procurement levers, integrating net zero into that thinking, into contracting, is going to be one of the critical ways in which we embed this and scale this across our industry.
Thanks, Robert. Just trying to see if there's any other questions that come through. I don't know if this is a statement or a question, but it says, would you agree that a net zero is a long road, which is to be started with a first rather small step, but to be taken by a whole community? And then I suppose it's more a statement afterwards, let FIDIC be the initiator of this step and the pacer of the road. I don't know if anyone wants to pass a comment on that, or is it just, Natalie, any thoughts or anyone to?
Yeah, Tracey, I mean, I guess that it does talk to, the charter it's a first step, I guess. It is that line in the sand, as Robert said. It's trying to generate, I guess, a call to action from engineers everywhere, from consulting engineers and from our industry, to try and really shift the dial in terms of climate change and climate action. But it is a long road. I think as part of the discussion around the charter, we've sort of talked about that. This is the first iteration of it. There will probably be future versions. We will need to tweak it. We will need to change it. There may be other things that become a focus. Obviously, net zero is a really key part of it, because that's one of the SDGs, I guess, around climate action. But there are other sustainable development goals as well, which are talked about in the charter, but perhaps not as much of a heavy focus. So that's, I guess, that biodiversity aspect. It all gets wrapped up, and it is all really important. But I think this is a really key step to starting us down the road, to galvanizing the engineering community into some action. But we can't take one step forward and then sit on our laurels and leave it there. We've certainly got to continue to continuous improvement and continue along that journey. So I think, I do agree with the statement that, every journey starts with a single step, right? And this is, I guess, the first, but a really key step from FIDIC to really make a change, I guess, in the engineering industry, and to show our support of the global goals.
Brilliant, thank you, Nat. And with that, I think we'll hand back over to Nelson. I'd just like to say a big personal thank to the committee, to Robert, Natalie, Stéphanie, and Idriss, and the rest of the committee who've played a significant part to kind of bring the charter to life. There's a lot of hard work that's gone in to get the document to where it is, and we know our journey is certainly not finished. There's going to be a lot of hard work that will sit behind it now. I think the real element really starts for us, but I know we're deeply committed around it. So it's just an enjoyment, and like Robert said at the start, it's nearly a privilege to bring the document to life. Nelson, we'll hand over to you now, because you can probably, there was some questions there around where next, what happens after this, and I know you'll get Tony to wrap up. So thank you, and we look forward to continuing this conversation with everybody.
Thanks very much, Tracey. Thanks for the panel. Actually, I think you've done a great justice on the wall. And starting from Robert, set out the whole process. There's a lot of questions that came through on contract. And Tracey's been so kind to ask me to maybe share some thoughts on that before I hand over to Tony. Believe it or not, we did extensive consultation of all our committees, and we asked the chairs and the vice chairs what's their opinion on the draft chapter. We also went about maybe 50 CEO around the world and to connect with them, and including our MA. And yes, it's very profound. The question was asked, what are we going to do on the contract side? There's a number of options in the contract side. Whilst I'm not a contract expert, I'm just the CEO, but let me share some thoughts with you on some of the feedback. I spoke to Vincent Lulu, who is the chair of the FIDIC Contract Committee, and his view was there's so many ways of crafting this. I think we need to follow the money. The first point he said was that we can take a high-level approach, where some of the panelists or people who came on the chat room said, can we introduce a clause? Yes, it is possible. There is an environmental clause in FIDIC contract. The question is, can we build that on and expand that to some extent and make sure at least, it goes more details. But the point that was said by Vincent is really about how do we make sure that the client, the people that has ultimate control on the money, buys into that. So we need to prescribe best practice, and we are looking at that as something we need to look at in the near future. The one question also being raised about how can you influence procurement? Yes, procurement is a big lever, major lever, whether it's private sector or public sector, or to do with multilateral development bank or bilateral development bank. There is an opportunity, and for those who doesn't know that, most, if not all of the MDB, the multilateral development bank, starting from the World Bank, all the way to African Development Bank, Asian Development, they've now signed up to adopt FIDIC contract. And one of the things we did was to create a FIDIC, what I call IFI, committee, and we created an advisory group with them. We brought the, MDBs, Chief Procurement Officer, to work with FIDIC to see how we can improve our contracting in the future. And be rest assured, we will be talking to those MDB, Chief Procurement Officer, to look at, where can we, particularly to do with particular condition of contract, where they've actually modified to suit their own need, to see how we can address that issue. So we'll be looking at that as an area of improvement. And also we've talked about, the issue on the net zero. In the wider sense. So my take on it, there's an opportunity for us to work very closely with the contract committee. But as Tracey and also Robert said earlier on, we do intend to create a number of task groups to look at how we can deep down into each of the points coming through in this particular charter to make sure we take it forward. So with that in mind, without preempting what Tony is going to say, I'm going to hand over to Tony and then I'll wrap up later on. Tony, it's back to you. I hope your mic is working very well. Tony?
Is that any better?
It's a little bit better and much better because speak closer.
Time to buy a new headset, I think.
Yes.
I think there are many takeaways from this, but I guess the first one is this is the start of a journey. It's actually, it needs to be a little bit quicker than a journey. We're not on a holiday. We are really going to have to drive here to get a solution. When you think about the fact that at the moment, I think it's 37% of the world's electrical energy is generated from coal, and that's occurring in very large measure in Asia, and we are seeing tremendous increases in demand for electrical energy through all sorts of processes that are going on both in the developed and developing economies. We have to drive a solution to the energy problem. And that's going to require a lot of engineering, a lot of thought, and a lot of innovation. I'm sure we've got it in us to do it, but we really do need to pick that piece up. I like the carbon engineers. Some people know I've used that term a bit myself before. I do think it's really quite important that we all raise our own awareness of the issues so that we can take a responsible approach to the design, the planning, the construction and operation of infrastructure, buildings, industrial facilities, and so forth. So I think that's a really important one. It sounds simple, but it's probably not as simple as that. Can FIDIC assist there with training and development and engage other partners to do so? The answer to that, I think, is yes. Procurement and contracting, absolutely. There's room there. There's a number of ways we can deal with that. And we will develop those over the next year or two. I think that is pretty important. And I do go back to Natalie's comment where she picked up I think I wrote down, you cannot offset losing your biodiversity, if I can summarize it that way. The same applies to Indigenous culture and heritage. There are many things in this world we cannot replace. And I'm sure we've all been to many cities in the world and seen what I call replica heritage. It doesn't work. And it's very sad to see our world think that that's okay. So I do think we have a lot to do when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals. We do have a lot to do in a broad sense. But I do think very specifically around the climate one, it is absolutely critical that engineers lead the outcome here. We have to drive the outcome. And that does mean us also becoming much more aware in EIA processes and in implementation of projects and operations to make sure that we deal with the biodiversity issues, that we assess and work through the cultural issues. I'm sitting in a city where the number of mature trees destroyed by transport projects is very high. And yet we have a government that's legislated net zero by 2050. So we have a really interesting set of behaviours that we actually need to start calling out as a profession. We have to start leading as a profession. We have to start providing guidance as a profession and being the group that communicates the solutions and in a very public way to give people the confidence that we can go there. At the moment, I see too much resistance, and I think we have a great opportunity to break that down. So well done to everybody. I'm really proud with the work that has been done, and I'm really looking forward, I think, to the next 2 years. It'll be terrific. So back to you, Nelson.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you to everybody who's joining us. We are coming towards the end. They just got a few housekeeping exercise. Barbara, if you can help me with the slide, that'll be extremely helpful. I do get the impression that a lot has been said, so I am not going to cover it any more than has been said. Just to put it this way, the journey's just started here. As been said by Tracey and also by Robert and my other colleagues, the charter is meant to be a benchmark, a platform for us. There will be a V2, a V3, a V4. There is a lot of commitments coming out of this charter, and we know for sure that we need to deal with it in a very, very open-minded and be a leader in the process. So what is critical is to understand that the commitment we are making, either to FIDIC as an organization, FIDIC operation, and the board will endorse that. More important, recommendation to our MA, which we understand our MA are in different cycle of development, and there will be support and guide that we can get, tools from FIDIC that will help them. But also learning from our member firms. Firms are doing great things. We need to showcase those things that they are doing individually and collectively. And I can actually learn a lot. Tony said, what FIDIC is good at is going to the market and gets best practice, pull it together and make it a global standard. So we will be doing a lot of that. We'll be showcasing. There are issues to do with our awards. How do we promote this in our projects? How do we look at this in the contract format? These are the things that FIDIC will be looking at over the next 1 or 2, 3 years. Even though Tony is only going to be president for 2 years, this agenda will go on after Tony, and it will go on after me, because we're all collectively responsible for this. So for my colleagues out there who are thinking, how dare you, FIDIC, making an audacity to make a statement? We have to start here. We are all on that journey. It may not be perfect, but actually it gives us a roadmap, an opportunity for us to keep working on. And I really want to thank Tracey and Robert and Idriss and also Natalie and others who are part of this conversation, because I know to get to this point has been easy. There's been a lot of to and fro and to and fro and to and fro, and we're yet to finalize it. But very soon we will finalize it, and we have the first issue. And I suspect the world that is listening to us will embrace it and also help us to move it to the next level. So with that in mind, I'm going to close with one more poll, which I've been asked to do. So if you go on to next, I think we talk about all this. We're going to do a state of the world. We are doing dedicated website. We are active in the COP, and there's a lot of things. But just to close out, on the last item on the list, the question is, it's very simple. It goes that with a global climate challenge, is it important for FIDIC to take a leading role and for the sector to meet the global goal? We have a responsibility, should we or not? Should we just be a silent operator, or should we continue, as most people said, that we are very good at advocacy and we can help the industry by creating standard? Should we or not? This is the question I'm putting today. Time to vote. I'll be surprised if somebody said no, because somebody have to do something. And it's important that we do have a say. I think Robert said advocacy, advocacy. I heard the word advocacy several times. And this is one thing FIDIC does very, very well. Bring the best in the industry together, and let's rally together and work together. So I want to find out, what is the output? Absolutely 96% yes. Mr. President, I think you have your mandate. We have a job to do, and we're going to give it a kickstart. So with that in mind, I'm going to thank everybody that's been, supported, the whole of the Sustainability Development Committee. I know we've only got a few of them here, but massive, massive thank you for even giving us that leadership and giving it a kickstart. And we all need a kick in the backside. I've got mine, and I've got the mandate, and we're just about to start the job. So thank you very much, wherever you are. Keep safe, and God bless you. Thank you.